All right. Let's talk behind the scenes of podcasting. I'm excited to ask you about this, both of you, because I'm curious from your perspective what it was like listening to shows for so long and then coming and working behind the scenes and what was
Mhm.
surprising for you. So maybe Kelsey, you share because you're more
Okay.
recent to working behind the scenes.
I feel like we're going to inevitably go down this path. There's a lot to say about sponsorships that I didn't know about. But what I want to say first is I think ad reads for me, I don't know, Christina, a good example is they sound so organic when you do them. I didn't realize all of the behind the scenes investment of time and just like logistics figuring out, some sponsors are specific in what they want you to say. Others just want you to do your thing and mention them. There are different types of ad reads, like they can be baked in, or you can have it be a totally separate recording that you splice into the show. Like I guess my mind was a little blown because you do such a good job of incorporating it in a way that feels organic. And I know that for you personally, all of the products that you choose to talk about are products that you personally use and love. So it doesn't ever feel out of place. But yeah, the behind the scenes and all the work, like the contracts and the correspondence, when you're working with a good amount of sponsors, it ends up taking a lot of time. There's a lot legally, just communication wise, that goes into it. And then the time investment, like, you got to say your ad, it's got to sound good. And I'm sure, Christina, you could speak more to like how long that actually takes on the back end. But if you mess up, you got to re-record it. And a 30-second or a minute long ad ends up taking a lot longer to produce than you would think.
Yeah,
So I
that's
think,
interesting
yeah.
you bring that up. I didn't even like think about that. So I'm glad this is why this is interesting
From my
for me.
listener perspective, yeah.
Yeah, it is true though. Like you don't realize how much goes into ads. Like it is a whole energy output. There's so much communication. I mean, that can be a whole job in itself. And then send some sponsors, you have to send it to them ahead of time. And then it's like so much back and forth. And then they'll be like, oh, you didn't say this or this order. And I'm just like, oh my God. So I will say, also, if you're a company and you're sponsoring podcasts, we should do a podcast about that. If
Oh,
you're a
yeah.
Literally.
company or a brand, because we have a lot to say. We can help you out. Don't worry. We can big time help you out. But um, it's just like you want to make sure that the person who's talking to the host is nice. That's all I'll say.
Yeah.
Because there have been brands that I love where it's like, because usually when I work with a company, it's a product I've been using, and then we like reach out, or I already have a connection because I post about them, and then it turns into a sponsorship. And there have been brands where I'm like, I love them, I use this product all the time. And then I'm like, let's do a sponsorship. And then we start working with their podcast people, and their podcast people are assholes. And I'm like, no,
And
like I
again, someone
Mhm.
else is representing your brand. Like you want
yeah.
to make sure it's a good fit because this is your face, the face of your
Mhm.
company when you're working with the podcast host people or the podcast
Yeah.
host directly.
Yeah, and part of that also is not being overwhelming. Like there's a company that we've worked with who I'm like, if they send me one more email, we're not doing this anymore. Like, like
Literally.
it's aggressive. It's aggressive. And I love the brand. Everybody's super nice, but it is the sheer amount of emails that are unnecessary that just makes me, I'm like, this is not worth my energy output. Like it
Yeah.
really. So there's that to keep in mind too. But that's interesting. Yeah. So, and I think something that I felt weird about when I first started recording ads was how long they took. And then it made me feel more comfortable when I started becoming friends with a ton of podcasters and realized, oh no, this is pretty common for it to take, 15 minutes to record a
Yeah.
90-second ad. Like it's just
Mhm.
it's like a whole thing. So
I mean,
there's
because
all of
from
that.
my end, it sounds so good and it flows so easily. I'm like, oh, she just has to sit there for 30 seconds and go on a little rant
Mhm.
about something she likes. And no, I now know better. That
Yeah,
is
I
not how and if you have that ability, that's amazing. But I feel like that's not really representative of the general podcast population.
I mean, this is gonna sound really weird, but I actually I resist things that I feel like are a lot of energy output you know what I mean? Where I'm like, oh
Yeah.
my God. And it is easier for me energetically to to record a whole episode, like a solo episode, than it is to record an ad. Like my ads, and it's I like the only thing that drives me is because I fucking love these companies. Like, but it is what drive like I have to like set aside a whole block of my day to just record ads because it's so much energy between like reading. I mean, sometimes they send you like 10 pages of notes and it's like sorting through all of this stuff and I'm like, wow, this is so much prep. I don't even prep this much for my episodes that are an hour long,
Literally.
you know? So, and it can also feel really hard to squeeze in everything that you want to say in that short amount of time for sure. And yeah, there is definitely a lot that goes into ads.
There's way more than like anyone probably realizes because one, like you said, the recording on the front end, it takes a long time. And then also too, the back end stuff, they could reject that recording. You have to re-record it. They want to see the whole episode together. They want to like know every single detail. They could you had a
They
company
want to
push
push
certain products that you're like you personally haven't had a chance to like, you have to study up their products if they have something specific they want to push. And
or they change at the last minute, like, you know, because I record everything in advance and then they're like, you know, 2 days before, oh, we need to actually talk about this product. And I'm like, the episode's already done. And then you push the whole schedule and even just fitting everything into the schedule. It's just a whole
schedule, man. That could be its own episode. Oh boy.
God.
Yeah, it's so much just in that.
Yeah, it's fun. Like, I love it and I love all these companies, but it definitely is just all the little things definitely add up for sure. And so it is a lot more
it's more
energy
of an
output than you might expect.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I didn't realize that actually either. So I'm glad you brought that up. That's a good one. What about you, Kelly?
Well, yeah, that was definitely one of them. But I feel like the main thing for me was before I started working for you 3 years ago in podcasting, I just like, oh, people just like, you know, hopped on their phone, recorded it for an hour and then kind of just like sent it to iTunes. Like, you know how you just send stuff to the cloud? It went up there and it did its own thing. But no, you need the correct tools. You need the headphones, you need the microphones, you need to record it a certain way, you need to edit it, you need to send it to Lipsum that then goes to iTunes. It goes through like 20 steps before you even get it aired. And so I was like,
oh my God.
Well, there's so many things you have to do just to put it out there. And I didn't even realize all of the tiny details that go into that. And like, you have to kind of like figure that out before you even do it. So that was like a huge learning curve.
Yeah. Well, the thing about podcasting that I think is it just screws with your mind is like what Kelly's saying, it's so many little steps. I mean, once you get it figured out, it's pretty like rinse and repeat. It's not hard. Like none of this is hard. It's just like all of these little things that really add up and you're like, oh wow, all these small details like with editing and the way shows are baked in and like there's just so many things that people don't think about. But yeah, I didn't realize that either. Like when I started a podcast, I thought I don't know, pressed upload to iTunes. I had no idea how it worked. And then it's just like, and then there are more steps for mine because I attach mine to my website. So like when you were uploading it for me, like for the website, then you had to do the whole website side as well. People who just upload it to iTunes, Spotify, it's faster because they're not doing all the other website stuff. But then there are people who transcribe all of their shows. That's a whole other thing.
We're not doing that, right?
Yeah. No, we're not.
If wonderful listener wants to volunteer.
No, you can pay a service for that. It's not that much. And we were talking about that. I forget when, Kelly, like we were talking about that. But if I was starting over, I wish I had transcribed all of my shows from the beginning. It would have been really good for SEO. But then I just hit a point where I was 4 years in and I'm like, I'm not going to start now. I'm too lazy.
When are we going to have the tech for that to just bam,
they have it. Yeah, it's called rev.com is really great if you're listening and you want transcription. So you can pay, I think it's pretty cheap just to get it transcribed. They have like different levels and the first one is the cheapest one and it does a pretty good job. I mean, it has mess ups. It's very much like automated, but then you can pay a bit more and have somebody actually go back and fix all the spelling mistakes. So just depending on the level of transcription you want. but there, I mean, tech is getting better and better at that. I mean, look at just
Yeah.
auto captions on Instagram and stuff. I mean, there's obviously still mess ups, but I think people now realize there are going to be mess ups and they can still get the gist of what's being said. So, yeah, there are just a lot of little, and then when you make artwork, right? When you make artwork for your show, that's a whole other thing. Like, I mean, this is why I outsource this, right? Like, it's just so much work. And podcasting for me was the last thing for me to really fully outsource completely. Like, I stayed editing my own show for so long because I felt like, I mean, I enjoyed it. I liked listening, and I felt like it wasn't hard. I felt like it was kind of mindless work, but it was like a time thing. It was just like another thing that was taking me time. And I was like, it's, even though it wasn't hard, it was just a time thing. And yeah. And then I finally did it. And I'm really glad I did because they do a better job. So shout out to Soulfire Productions.
Frees up so much time. Like you said, it's a huge time commitment. Like you think you might only be talking about it for an hour that week, but like you do it every week. You have to do all the background editing. Like it's at least a day's work or like half a day's work of putting into it. So it's not like it's just an hour and you're done. It's a lot that goes into it, especially in the beginning when there's a huge learning curve too.
Yeah, and for me to have somebody else listen and pull out good quotes is really helpful because I feel like I can't do that for myself. I like to have somebody else do it. So that's really valuable too. Like the artwork, all of that is a whole other thing. So yeah, there's a lot that goes into it.
Now, I'm wondering for you, Christina, what was like the biggest surprise? Because you've been in it for so long, but like, do you remember like what the biggest surprise was for you when you first started your podcast?
Oh my God, when I started my podcast, I remember thinking it was going to be just so easy. And for me, the initial setup of the show like almost scarred me because, you know, this was a while ago. This is like 5 years ago, and I had no idea what the hell I was doing. And now looking back, I literally still don't know what I did because when I look back, I remember it was 2 days and I was holed up in my bedroom for 2 days. I didn't move and I was doing all this work and I was using this blog post to follow the steps, and I kept messing up, and I'm like, I didn't sleep for a whole day, and then finally I figured it out and I felt so accomplished, and I'm like, holy shit, it's so hard to set up a podcast. And now I look back and I'm like, what the hell was I doing? It's not that hard. Like, like I have no idea why it took me so long. I think there just wasn't as many resources out as there is now. And I think the process was a bit more complicated. And also I was trying to link it up to my website, and you know, I'm 20 years old. I don't know what the hell I'm doing. So that almost like scarred me with it. You know, I think also just with editing, I don't do too much editing, but there were definitely times with sound and adjustments where I'm like, wow, if you don't really know what you're doing here, this could be tough. And then I think also with even just recording itself, you know, most people think it's like you just talk and go. That's not how it's ever been for me. It's really interesting because I think there's something to the time pressure when you're on an interview where it just flows. But if I'm doing a solo episode, I mean, it'll take me double or triple the length of the episode to record it. Why? I don't know. It's really an odd thing. Or even, you know, when I first started the podcast, I had 2 co-hosts back in the day, which is so crazy. And for us to kind of catch our groove and just get settled in and fix all the tech, I was like, this is just a lot. Like, it's just so much happening. And it was super fun. But I think I just didn't realize all of the little things. And with the sound quality, you think that sound quality is just, oh, I just use a mic. No, all of the little details really, really stand out. So I think that was really eye-opening for me as well. And then also just oh man, how do I describe this? The podcast community, like there's some type of weird bond between podcast hosts. It's like when somebody else has a podcast, it's like, oh, cool. Do you want to collab? Or it's like, I don't even know. I just feel like people in the podcasting space became my family really quickly. And again, like what Kelsey was saying, you can have one in the last episode. Whoa, you can have one really deep episode with somebody. This has happened to me so many times, and I'm like, oh yeah, we're like best friends. Like we're super close, you know. Even to this day, there are people who I've done like one podcast episode with them. It was super deep. We had an amazing conversation, and I haven't talked to them for like 2 years. And this just happened to me the other day. Like they reached out to me and we just talk like we're like super close, deep friends, like nothing happened. Like, and it's like, it's like you've known each other forever. And I was talking to somebody about this the other day and I'm like, this is one of the reasons why I love my job, because I feel like I get to know people on a number of levels through podcasting and also through the other things I do, but I get to know people on a deeper level sometimes than they even know themselves, or that people in their lives know them. It's just super bonding, So I don't think I realized the power of that, like how transformational an hour episode can be. Like,
Yeah,
it's
it's
really
wild.
cool.
It is really
Mhm.
cool. Yeah, I want to go off that too. Like, I didn't realize the like bonds and relationship, but again, how deep a person can go on a podcast. Whereas, like in real life, that could take years of opening up, where they can jump on a podcast and open up about something, and that is just like such a huge bonding factor. And also, I feel like it's really develops that kind of person, like you can be vulnerable on a podcast, and that can help you like get through things in life too. So it's like it just develops a different kind of person, which is really cool. Like I know the first time I went on your show, Christina, that was the first time I ever talked about like my eating disorder in the past. And I was like, whoa, how can I like open up on a podcast, but I can't even open up to my family and friends about this? It's just like
Mhm.
very interesting and very cool that
Yeah, you're
that can like
literally
cultivate.
putting yourself in a position to be vulnerable, like going into it knowing it. And I feel like almost, yeah, I mean, just like in a good way, forcing yourself to be vulnerable and like kind of signing yourself up for it. And that probably helps you grow as a person so much more than you ever thought.
Yeah, definitely.
There's some weird type of magic that happens when you're in the flow of a conversation, and there will be guests sometimes who I can tell are nervous, and you just like get them comfortable and then they just forget they're on a podcast. Like, especially when you're in person, you just forget you're on a show. And there's something, I know for me, like I've always been super open on my show, and I didn't at the time. It's not like I'm thinking, oh, thousands of people will hear this. I'm just like thinking I'm recording this on my computer and I'm just talking to myself. You know what I mean? Is how I feel. So then there's some type of freedom in being able to talk about deep things. And again, that's also my type of show though, right? There are so many
Yeah.
different
Yeah.
types of podcasts. There are more educational shows, funnier shows. That's just my type of show. But it's hard to describe the weird magic that occurs,
Yeah,
and
there's
even
magic.
for the listener experience of, listening to someone. Sometimes people will say to me, this probably seems weird, but I feel like I know you. And I'm like, no, it doesn't. It doesn't seem weird to me. Like, you do know me if you listen to all my podcast episodes.
Yeah.
And that's just how I feel about it. Like,
Yeah,
yeah, you do know me pretty well.
it is pretty cool because it's like I know I listen to so many podcasts. And I feel like those people are like my friends,
I
and
know.
I know like even like when I first met you, Christina, I'd listened to your show for like 2 years before then, and I was like, I feel like she's already my best friend, and I already know her so well. And that goes for like
Same.
any podcast that you listen to, and that person's like vulnerable and deep on their show. It just builds this like connection to the people you're listening to, connection to the people you're talking with, and just builds like a really cool community.
Mhm. I was thinking about this the other day with relationships in my life. I don't have a period of like the awkward, like, oh, we're still getting to know each other. It's like
Just
as
dive
soon as I
straight
know,
in.
yeah, I just go straight in. It's like if you meet me for the first time, this is so funny. We talked about this, Kelly, like when I was on my dating rampage like 2 years ago,
Mhm.
and like every person, they were like, I can tell you're a podcaster. And I'm like, yeah, you know?
You just
But
get to the good stuff.
you just gotta get to the juice. But I was also gonna say something else that I surprised me was, I had listened to so many people's shows or just knew them from their books or just interviews, whatever, even if they weren't hosts. And being a podcast host, I've had the opportunity to meet some really amazing people and meet a lot of people that I used to really look up to. And I, and many still do really respect, but I realize that so many people are not the same in real life as they are like on social media, on their podcast. I find that on podcasts, like, I don't know, some people are you it's exactly what you hear
It's
is
like
what you
one
get.
extreme or the other.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. But it's really interesting. Like, and I think that's like hard for me to internalize, because I feel like how could I get on a show and just talk for so long and pretend to be like, that's just too exhausting. Do you know what I
Yeah, it
mean?
sounds exhausting.
So it's just really weird to me when and now I can hear it. It's like I'll listen to shows and I'm like, literally, I know you. I've talked to you. I've been with you at an event. Like, we've been at a mutual party. We've been at a party. I've been around you, and like you're completely different. And that's really hard because some people are like that. I like to think most aren't, but there are many that are. So that's hard
Yeah,
for me to wrap my brain
there's
around.
definitely once you are in the world and you get to know like certain podcasters and certain guests that come on, it's eye-opening for some aspects because like you said, some are just completely not who they put on to the world that they are. And so that can be like a letdown, but there I would say that the majority are definitely who they are, but you can tell with the people who are fake and not authentic.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I always watch out for people who literally read their episodes. This annoys me. And I actually
And
think
you
a lot
can
of people don't.
tell.
Some people can't though.
Yeah, it
Well,
depends.
now I'm wondering who I think
I feel like
doesn't.
we can tell because we're like in the world, we like know, but a lot of people just like straight up read from a sheet. And
Mm-hmm.
that's just like mind blowing to me that it just creates boring episodes. One, I feel like you're not being yourself and it's just not the content that I
Or you're just
personally want to
overthinking
consume.
it and it takes away from the personability. That's not a word. You know what I mean? But it takes away from that element of like connecting with your audience. So maybe it's your words and your thoughts and your feelings, but I think the beauty of podcasting is it's a very organic way of having a conversation, just like you're having a conversation in person, but you're sharing it with tons of people instead.
Yeah, well, then it's also like the over editing. For example, there are so many hosts that edit out every single and like in blank space, and I don't like doing that. And then sometimes I'll talk to people in real life, and I'm like, you speak completely differently than I heard you on your show.
I would never
I
want to
don't
go
trust
through.
that.
I know
Yeah,
myself and I
Red
would never want
flags.
to edit all my likes or ums.
me neither.
Nobody got
Me
time for
neither.
that.
Me neither. So, yeah, and I think also something else that maybe people don't realize is as a host, well, I'll speak for myself. But like I I work really hard on all my content, and I do this because I really like to connect with people and help people. And it really, really means a lot to me when people show up. Like when people, you know, reach out when they respond to an Instagram post, like however they like are in my community and showing up, because sometimes it can feel like you're sharing all this stuff and like, where is everyone? Like,
Mhm.
where is everybody? Right. And then you find out like people be like, that episode changed my life. And I'm like,
Tell me.
I wish you told me
I
that.
just poured my
Yeah.
heart
I
out to
like
you,
that.
and then there's crickets.
Yeah. Yeah. Like
Yeah.
hosts really, really like the feedback, and even just like the free support for any podcast that you listen to that you enjoy, like leaving a rating and review makes the world of a difference for people. And it takes you 5 seconds. It's free for you to do. And it's just
Hint,
such a simple
hint.
way to support people. Yeah. I mean, but I'm just speaking for all hosts because this is something that hosts talk about all the time. It's like, how do we get people? Like, we know there are so many people who listen to the show. We can see our numbers and they don't leave a rating and a review.
Yeah.
And there are people who are like, there are people in my community who have listened to every single episode, like since day one, and they'll be like recently, they'll be like, "Oh my God, I just realized I've been listening to your show for 5 years. I'm like a mega fan, and I've never left a rating and review." And I'm like, "Come on,
Yeah.
guys!"
It
Like,
takes 5 seconds. You're getting hours and hours
yeah,
of free content.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
don't
it's
think
just an easy
people
way.
I don't think people realize how big of a deal that is. Like I know I didn't realize until I started working in the podcasting world that
Mhm.
a rating and review is huge for
mhm,
podcasters. It gets more visibility for your show. It gets hopefully like sponsors for your show and how much sponsors can pay for your show. So like sometimes it's livelihood of that podcaster
mhm.
and like if they're especially if they're making like a living off of it, like it's a huge deal just to like have a good review that takes you 1 minute. It means the world for them.
I mean, you get the amount of information you get on podcasts is out of control. Like I remember when I first found podcasting and I was like, is this a trick? Am I gonna have to pay for this? I thought I was on some free trial. And I was just, and because I thought I was going to start having to pay for it, I was listening like 15 hours a day, like a crazy person, not sleeping.
Yeah.
And it was crazy. And then I was like, all of this is for free. I mean, I think I got more, like, I started listening to podcasts when I was in college, and podcasts taught me more than my college education.
100%.
And I stand by that.
And
I stand by that. Like,
yeah, you can pick exactly what you want to learn about. You have access to so many perspectives on whatever topic, even experts. Like, there's a lot of experts in the podcasting world. And so it's so valuable, so much information at your fingertips. You can do it while you're doing other things. And like, the least you can do is take 5 seconds out of your day to go support the shows that pump out so much content for you for free. And hopefully you now know how much goes into it truly on the back end. It's not just sitting down and talking for 30 minutes on a given day. Like, there's a lot of work that goes into it. So yeah, as podcasters, we want to hear how we're helping you.
And you
That's
can like,
what
you
drives
not
us.
only can you learn so much, and I've like, again, had like basically a whole education from podcasts, but like, it's now a main form of entertainment in so many people's lives. Like, I know it's my first way of entertainment, and I probably listen to podcasts like 5 to 10 hours a day, and it's how I entertain myself. It's like, I don't watch TV as much. I don't read books as much because you can do it while doing other things. So you're not even having to pay for like cable or like internet. It's just on your phone. So yeah, it's easy to just leave that review, and especially for something that brings so much value to your life.
yeah, it's a simple thing that has a huge impact. And this is true for, I mean, I could go off about content creation in general. I think just any type of content creator, people think that people just like sit around and do nothing. Content creation is a lot of work.
My eyes have been so opened
Yeah.
since working for you, Christina. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, I think about, when I was more in the nutrition space of like food bloggers, like there's a lot. I mean, it'll take you a whole day to like do a recipe. Even to do that in one day is like pretty good. It's so much work that goes into everything, and people don't realize that. And what's always interesting to me is, in a different context, people would assume it's like, okay, if you're a food photographer for a company, they're like, of course that's your full-time job. But if somebody's like a food blogger for themselves, they're like, do you just do nothing all day? It's like, no, it's even more work. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's really interesting. But I mean, podcasting can be a full-time job, depending on how you do it. And if you're making it your full-time job, there's so much else that goes into it. And just like making things that go off the podcast. So yeah, it's work, It's like people get paid, actors, right? Actors are spending so much time acting, and they got to get paid for it, right? So it's like, why would any other form of entertainment not be the same? I don't know. It just blows my mind, the perception around it.
Yeah, it's kind of weird. Something I learned when I started joining the podcasting world is like how much people think they kind of have like access to you, like free access to you, like you said, with like even the recipe development. Like, people just expect everything from free from then on out. And I'm like, no, like, this is still people's livelihoods. Just because they give a piece of themselves once a week to you doesn't mean that you can demand everything from them. So that's really interesting to see the other side of how people just expect everything now.
Yeah. Well, that's like when brands want you to do ads for them for free.
Yeah,
like,
they'll send you
what?
free product and get a whole bunch of ads.
If
Like,
you feel compelled, just spend a good 3 minutes talking about how it changed your life.
It's like, is free product gonna pay my mortgage? I'm just wondering. Like,
exactly. Like, even they would never demand that on like a radio show or a TV show ever.
Or like a billboard, like, oh man, yeah, there's a lot that goes into it. And then even just in like random audio glitches, I don't know, there's so many random things that can go wrong. It's just like figuring out, and again, it's not hard, but it's like, as soon as you figure it out with tech and all of that, it makes a huge difference. And even, I think, even refining like the guests you have on your show, if you have guests, like that in itself is an art, right? Of like figuring out good guests and having interviewing skills and developing interviewing skills and having good guest interviews. all of that is an art, is a practice that people don't realize. And I think, right now Clubhouse is like taking off. And I was saying, like, you can tell don't get me started on Clubhouse. It's very interesting to listen to, but you can tell when someone's a podcaster because they're so much better at speaking.
Yeah. And it honestly takes time. And I feel like it's half of it's like time and experience. Another half is you also like have it or you don't. Like some people are just not good at interviewing or aren't that entertaining to listen to on podcasts. It just is what it is. So you have to like ask yourself, is that person me? And or how can I get better too? And again, that comes with time. Like I'm sure now, Christina, you're at the top of your game compared to like year one, and you'll just keep getting better every year.
This needs to be a whole episode for sure. I think we can dive further into this.
Yeah, there's a lot to be said. Kelly, if you're not entertaining, don't do this. No, it's just like, but the thing is, if you don't provide value, like you just have to provide value, and value comes in many forms, right? Value can come in the form of education, of humor, of, deep, intense, raw emotional conversations. Like there's so many ways to provide value, but you have to provide value one way or the other for people to listen.
Find which way works for you and that you can do it well.
Exactly. So good stuff. This is interesting for me. I like hearing this kind of stuff. So let us know if you have any questions about anything we discussed, if you want us to go more in depth about any topics.
Yeah, follow us at the Podcast Connector on Instagram. Shoot us a DM if there's any topics you want us to go into. We're more than happy to listen to what you have to say.
All right, guys. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll talk to you next episode. Bye.
Bye.